So I want to welcome the audience who is going to be tuning in to watch this Q&A after they screen Materna. Welcome to you. I would like to welcome our panel of cast and crew. We are so very grateful that you're with us today and very excited that the film is a part of the narrative feature category. So we are here with our director, a producer, and lead actress from Materna. We have David.
And co-writer.
And writer, yes. Pardon me. Good catch.
Sorry.
We have our director, David Goodnick. We have our co-writer and lead actress, who, by the way, also won Best Actress at 2020 Tribeca Film Festival, which is absolutely phenomenal. And her name is Asal Abdulina. And then we also have with us the producer, Liz Cardenas. Did I say that right? Wonderful. So once again, thank you all for joining us today. So I have about 7 questions. We'll see if we get through them. They kind of run the gamut. So we'll get a little deep with things and then some more lighthearted thoughts. So, and if we don't get to all of them, that's fine. We'll just let this ebb and flow how it needs to. So I think the first question is directed at David. This is such a touching and kind of guttural, very interpersonal piece. I'm very curious, sort of your personal path that brought you to the subject matter. It's an explorative concept. It connects to the female experience. Obviously, that's the tie there, and it's doing it in a variety of ways, and connecting it to this singular incident. So, what's your personal path getting to this film?
Thank you for that, for everything you've said, and for having us here. I would say that when I first started talking to Asal and to Liz and to Emily, the other producer who couldn't be here, she's shooting, and with Jade Ashet, the other co-writer, who's also shooting. I was at a place in my life. I was probably at maybe my most vulnerable, and I was looking to confront a lot of what was going on in my own personal life, in my work, for the first time, to really try and go there, to deal and heal, and I think Soul, correct me if I'm wrong. Safe to say that maybe you were in a similar place, dealing with some challenging issues that you wanted to take on as well, and so was Jade, and y'all were the people I felt sort of safest with to take some of this stuff on, and that was the genesis of it. We just started talking to each other about what we had. What we were dealing with, and how we were going to turn those sort of real stories into a screenplay, into a drama, to dramatize those incidents, and that was how we started.
It sounds like a very kind of cathartic, healing experience. I hope it was, especially because you were all kind of writing and doing it together. So that's very interesting, that background. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was. For me personally, it was a cathartic, healing experience. But you know how it is with healing. The second you feel like you heal, the next day happens. And you've got new battles to take on. But yeah, I mean, it was. It certainly helped in a real sort of fundamental way for me. I don't know how you felt, Asal.
Yeah, I'd like to lead into that with Asal, because as the co-writer, but also a lead, you started out with one hat with writing, and you at the beginning, and you kind of ended it with the on-screen presence and translating that on screen. So how did the writing affect your role and your emotions through the acting, and how did that all, fit together versus in other instances where you may not be involved with the writing and you're just interpreting what somebody else gives you?
Yeah, David is right. I as well was in a in such state where I recently had a tragedy in my family, and there was this kind of desire to, for some reason, I don't know, maybe it's kind of part of grief, you know, but there was a desire to keep telling the story and telling and telling, and I just was like, but it's kind of hard to find somebody who is willing to listen for so many times, you know, and for some reason David was the person who was willing to listen to me telling my story over and over, and that's how our, as he was telling, our kind of like meeting and desire to work together came about. There is a definitely aspect of catharsis in writing, because when I was writing my part, and then David was kind of contributing and writing his part, there was definitely a lot of things that I could not say to uh, my family. Let's be honest. I couldn't say to my family that I was able to write it out. And then, of course, acting it out was a very different thing, because then I had to deal with all that again. And that was very, I would say, healing. It was very healing. But interestingly, now we just rewatched the movie again. I was telling my friend that it's interesting how now the story has its own life. It like lives on now. And I moved on someplace else, but the story is there, and it's just so interesting to know if this is also healing to other people or not.
That's you know, as a singular audience member, I definitely took part of that away for myself. So hopefully that you're happy to hear that, because I think that that is a theme that comes away, and there's something universal and cyclical about, you know, what you are interpreting through the characters. So it's enjoyable for that way, because it's relatable. So I think one element, so kind of bringing it back, and anybody's free to answer this, bringing it back, David, to what you're saying. Is my audio okay?
Oh no, I was just gonna sort of piggyback a little. One of my favorite responses that I recently got to the film was somebody said to me, "Yeah, as soon as I felt it, I had to call my mom." So that was, yeah, that was nice. I like that response. But sorry, go on.
No, totally fine. So I like what you said about healing, and how, you know, as soon as you get it, you have to re-get it for the next thing that requires healing. And so one of the themes, to me, that's one of the more clear themes, is balancing isolation versus non-isolating. And I know that theme existed before the current state of the world, but now the movie lives in that state. And so could you, anybody's free to talk about this idea that of isolation, how the movie perhaps has been changed by it living in this world now, whereas before it did not, and if people's reactions are different because of that, or if your feeling about the film is different because of that. So anybody feel free to talk about that.
Yeah, Liz, I feel like this is definitely an issue that you've been talking about a lot. If you want to.
And David, you actually wrote a piece that was in Variety that kind of dealt with this specific thing. So in my head, I was like, oh yeah, this is perfect for David to talk about. But we definitely both, you know, Emily and I and David have had conversations, definitely had visceral reactions throughout the course of this period of, like, say, quarantining, in which we're like, oh my gosh, what we're literally feeling is like what's in the movie, and those are the themes in the movie, which now are kind of universal. Although as human beings, we often go through periods of isolation and then wanting connection. And it's been really interesting for us as filmmakers, because even as a producer, you still are bringing your heart and soul into the project, trying to, you know, have the director's vision on screen. But I have my own personal, you know, things that I'm dealing with too. And that's, you know, the film and collaborating with everyone is therapeutic for me as well. And so we all were artists coming together to tell this story, going from isolation to connection. And then we're like, okay, great. Now we can present the movie to the world. We're going to put Tribeca, you know, in competition in person, and then everything shut down. So it was very difficult for us in terms of emotionally, that this thing that we're now ready to share and kind of can't, obviously now with things like, you know, Ben Film Festival and others doing these virtual film festivals and these Q&As, we're allowed to now kind of have some sort of connection. It's not the exact same. But, you know, that really, you did pick up on a main theme, and one that was on purpose, that David and the co-writers, you know, crafted, was this thing of these characters going from isolation to connection. And I think that's so important for our growth, you know, as artists and as human beings. I don't know if I answered that correctly. If there's something you want to add, David.
Mm-hmm. That was a great answer. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I have a coherent thought, but I will try. You know, it's funny. This is such an interesting process, just talking with you about the film, because there's just, you know, when you first, just a minor, and then I'll get right to it. When you first start, trying to make the film and trying to get folks to make the film with you, you know, before you shoot, you've written it, you know, your command of the language of how to talk about the film is so strong and clear, and it just comes naturally. It's like, oh, you know, whether you're talking to a cinematographer or a production designer or an actor, it's like, it's all, you have your talking points. They're all so crystal clear.
Yeah.
And then you go on set, and then slowly over the course of the shoot, your clarity is completely decimated and deconstructed. Hopefully, because if you're doing your job, you're allowing other artists, actors, and, you know, department heads and crew to reimagine the film and take it someplace else. And so that by the time you get to the end of the production, the words that you had, you don't really know, you don't have them anymore. And so, and you take that, you go into the edit, and you have to find a new language to tell the story, the language of images and sound, which is very separate from words. And, you know, you have to rediscover what the movie is and what it means. And then, so by the time you get to the end of the edit, you hopefully have found that, but it's a different language. It's picture, it's sound, it's something more disassociative and poetic, the truth that you found. So, you know, going into these situations where you have to then articulate, it's always so like, I'm just kind of rediscovering in this new verbal language, what is the movie? And then you have all these sort of world events that take the movie and again redefine what it is. So yeah, I mean, loneliness is one of the sort of core DNA, pieces of DNA of the movie. I think we were all living in our own kind of emotional and psychological quarantines before there was an actual physical quarantine when we made this. And COVID is a disease, and, you know, so is loneliness. And there is definitely an arc in the film in which, over the, in the first part, there are no people in it. In the second one, there are 2 people in it, and in the third, there's a few. So over the course of it, the film is becoming populated with more people, and each of them are striving to cope with their own sort of self-imposed emotional and psychological isolation. So there is a strange, surreal, parallel relationship between unintended relationship between what we were dealing with in the film and then what happened in the world.
I know, because it's so interesting how, if you even look at like Caitlin Shields' character, it's like I felt that this character was so compelling, you know, David writing this character, and I obviously related as everyone can with our own issues of isolation. But then watching it now, I literally remember being like going outside for the first time because like feeling very awkward, you know, getting out into the world. And so rewatching the film now with this context, it just adds a whole other layer. You know, you like I said kind of before, like the visceral reaction to like Caitlin Shields' character going outside for the first time, you feel it just watching the movie. But now with everything context wise in real life, you were like, oh my gosh, I actually experienced that, you know, because of COVID.
Yeah, it's interesting how unintentional that was. Obviously, you know, this was unknown to you all at the time, but there's just it in this bizarre way, it living in this world now, it enriches the intent of some of these themes. It's really interesting how that played out, you know.
Yeah, it is. Just jumping off of what you were saying, Liz, because each of the vignettes, each of the stories are perhaps to some degree less in the final, but that is in its own an arrival, sort of dramatic arrival by the end. But each of them are kind of chamber pieces in which a person very literally has to leave their house to achieve a kind of breakthrough. So, and there's a lot of anxiety in doing that.
Mm-hmm.
It is so strange that is literally the everyday reality of leaving your home. It's like, oh, I got to put on there's all sorts of threats, but they're not just physical.
Right.
Right. To go back to what you talked about, David, in regards to language and how the film evolved that way in terms of how you share it verbally with others. I found it really interesting that you said that, because I've, you know, and maybe you've heard this before too, but I've always thought of a film as its own individual life, you know. It's sort of like when it's written, it's being born, and then as it goes through production, it is growing into this teenager, and it's dealing with all of these angst and change, and it's becoming its own. And then when it's out in the world, it begins to age, and the language about it should change in all those different stages. So I think about each individual film as a life, so it really correlates to what you're saying.
But it's also reborn, and it becomes
reborn.
You know,
Yeah.
Really a kind of birth, life, death, rebirth cycle for sure. Yeah.
Yes. So I have one other storyline question, and then I would like to talk about the cinematography a little bit, and then some more practical questions about the production. So in regards to the storyline, and again, I'll just leave this open to everyone. I'd like you guys to discuss a little bit about the symbolism or choice of the subway car, and that being the kind of bucket or container for these women to come together and their characters to kind of begin to intertwine before they go back off into their individual world. So what's the significance of the subway car, and as well as the incident that's happening on the subway car?
I mean, I think I can just quickly jump in, and then curious to hear your takes. I think just on a very well, I think first thing I would say is, just as a born and raised New Yorker, the train has always been a kind of place of, and I know New Yorkers will be maybe really confused hearing me say this, but I love taking the train. I love the train at rush hour, when everybody is on top of each other, everybody's complaining, everyone's, you know, like, get out of my space, and da-da-da. I love that. I'm just like, you know, I mean, no, I'm not, I mean, that's like creepy, but like, you know what I mean? but I also just love the act of sitting there and observing and taking in. I just feel a sense of connection to the city and to people when I'm on the train. It's sort of like a place of just zen. And so there's that. But then it's also, I think, captures some of the dichotomy. We talked a lot about loneliness, but I think the film is also about relationship and interconnection. And I don't think this is a uniquely New York psychic state and problem, but like there is this sense, no matter where you are in New York, your sense of being alone and sense of being with other people are always sort of at war, our intention, because you're always in crowded places. You're always sort of fighting for your space because everyone's literally on top of each other. It's just too many people to be on one island. Although now everyone's leaving, but that's a whole other thing. But so there is just this constant dichotomy and tension between being alone and being with other people. And so the train felt like an appropriate container for that dialogue, for that exchange.
That's very interesting. That whole idea of that is one of the most communal places in New York where this takes place. So.
And then there's the issue of just, it's a city of strangers. And we have, I think, increasingly come to regard strangers as, I mean, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but, just the feeling of, wanting to know what is going on in this person's life, that a stranger is not just a prop or a satellite in our own lives, that they have their own humanity that takes them from being just some other to being a real full three-dimensional human being. So there's just, the city, to me, I think, thrives on that curiosity, and for me has always been a source of inspiration. Like, what's going on in these people's lives? And so, yeah, the train felt like a nice springboard to do that.
No, that's some great insight. I imagine, I imagine the audience will be really interested in hearing that. So thank you for that, all that in-depth stuff behind that.
Also, too, I was like the only, and I shouldn't say only, but I think one of the only like non-New Yorkers on the production. And so to me, it was, and I love New York City. I've been there so many times, but have never lived there. The subway to me is scary, just because I'm like, am I getting on the right thing? And I'm getting lost and it's overwhelming. And so even when we were like doing the pre-production for the shoot, I'm like literally having like Emily or other people like kind of explain stuff to me. And so to me, like David was saying, it's something there, energy in New York City, which is amazing. And then it's also like you can totally get lost because there's so many people. And so just from an outsider point of view, a non-New Yorker, point of view, I felt like the subway was so perfect because of all the things that, like David was saying, it encapsulated. And from somebody that's not from New York, there is something exciting about the subway that is both communal and also scary and can be overwhelming. And there's all these different things. So I was really excited with David, using the subway as that vehicle. I thought that was spot on.
Right. And that's great that you mentioned that, because just to bring it back to, beyond New York, to bring it back to the characters, to bring it back to theme, they're all dealing with the problem of contact and their own isolation. So just on a purely kind of dramaturgical level, the train was a perfect way to force these characters to confront their phobias and their anxieties as a kind of, it's like a little pressure cooker for all the emotional and psychological themes.
Yeah, quite literally, almost in a sense. Thank you for that. That was really, really in depth and interesting.
Thanks for the question.
Oh, good. So I would like to, since we're getting close to time, time being about half an hour, I would love to just at least highlight briefly the cinematography. I know that it also won Best Cinematography at 2020 Tribeca, so that is phenomenal as well. So congrats to your cinematographers. I think, so three words came to mind when I think about how this was shot. It was very sensitive, it was very meticulous, and it was very intimate. And that pairs well with the performances, the dialogue, the storyline. So best of accolade, absolutely, absolutely. Without them being here, I thought maybe Asal and David or one of the other could talk about your relationship to the cinematographers, how you interacted with them and how that affected their choices and your choices as director and a lead. Just that whole relationship, and if choices were made on their end or your end or both on how to go about this.
Yeah, I could just jump in there. I think I would say sort of two central pillars to sort of put the house on was I think you love the words you chose because I couldn't have said it better. The intimacy and sensitivity was a dominant sort of visual idea. How to and again, that's sort of that's an adjective that could kind of be hard to execute. So I think the way we went about doing that was to shoot everything from the perspective of the character. There are, let's say, four leads. When we're in their story, everything that they're seeing, everything that they're feeling is visually expressed. So the style, the structure is all starts from the character, not the other way around. And so so I think with that in mind, it just made everything subjective, so that the audience is feeling what the character is feeling, and so that one-to-one relationship creates, I think, intimacy and sensitivity, because the form is sensitive to what the character is going through. And then on the flip side, there was this idea that we were exploring in each of them, which had its own visual consequences, because each of them are dealing with a kind of invisible, an invisible force or a ghost, or a, in Jean's story, there's a virtual person. In Mona's story, there's a missing mother. In Ruth's story, there's this mysterious incident. In Perizad's story, there's a deceased person, and in each of them, these invisible forces are influencing the psychology of the character. So we were exploring this question of, well, how do you photograph absence? How do you photograph an invisible force? Not in a literal sense, but how do you convey that feeling? And again, back to character, how do you translate emotionally that absence onto the character? So those were some of the,
right.
I think that those were the two central questions. How do we get as close to what the character's feeling as possible? And then how do you convey that uniting visual and emotional thread?
But also, I think it's important to notice that, well, all the stories are female stories, and the cinematographers on all the stories were female, right? Am I right?
One was male.
One was male. Okay, I'm just gonna talk. I'm just gonna talk about my story then.
His name is Kelly. Everybody thinks he's female.
Yeah.
Which, you know.
I'm sorry. I'll talk about my story then, because it was, I think for me it was very. I'm grateful that we had our cinematographer, because there was such a, again, yes, sense of intimacy, and I could absolutely trust her, because I could just land. I was able to land my vulnerability and everything to David as a director, and to her, because I felt like there was this sense of she could understand, she could understand my culture, she could understand myself, and she could definitely, being a mother herself, she could understand and know how to tell the story about, family of three women, mother, grandmother, and daughter.
And she had also shot a film in Kyrgyzstan, which, yeah. So yeah, one of the vignettes, A Soul's story, is set in Kyrgyzstan. We've been talking about New York a lot,
Right.
but a quarter of the film is shot in Kyrgyzstan. And Jaya, the cinematographer, had shot a film in Kyrgyzstan, a short film that we were big fans of. So that was also.
And
I love to hear that, the relationships between cinematographer and actor. I mean, there's only so much you can do to prepare and have everything be perfect, but the relationships are what make it come alive in the ways, in sometimes in unexpected ways, or fail if the relationship is too stark or too businesslike. So I'm really happy to hear that comfortability coming through, female to female, or whatever the case may be, but in this case that was it. So that's great to hear. So we're getting down to the time, although I have a feeling we could probably talk for another hour. But before we wrap things up, I would like everybody just to kind of go around and give any kind of last thoughts on the film that they would like to share, and also let the audience know what is going on with you since the film. Anything new that you're working on or are involved with, please feel free to share. So if you want to start, Liz, we can start with you.
I will, because the one comment I was going to make kind of on this last topic, I'm obviously drawn to both David's vision and his spirit, this collaborative energy that he had, this wanting to come from a place of healing. And I thought that the story was so beautiful, and I loved the unique, not just the unique story, but the unique storytelling. And so the idea to, as a producer, when you win like the best cinematography and you have 3 cinematographers, that says a lot about David and his vision of literally having a uniform story with all these different collaborators. And so I was really excited by that. And I just think I know, but how often does that happen? I mean, like that's amazing that there's that visual language that's maintained throughout the whole feature film with these individual collaborators. I just think that's so cool. And so obviously I was, drawn to the story. Then this whole unique storytelling approach, collaboration was just amazing. And I think I was really proud to be a part of it. And I just shot a feature film. I produced a feature film that we shot during COVID right now, which was interesting. And I've written something, a script. And David and I did definitely, responded to each other as kind of multi-hyphenates. And so, David is very encouraging, obviously, to A Soul as a writer and an actress, and she was an executive producer on the film. And so I love this family that we've kind of created, in which we're all continuing to push each other in various artistic ways.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
And Liz also, had along with Emily, a big part in helping to shape the, the feature script. The integral role in developing, not just fostering and enabling all of us, but also helping to shape the overall narrative, the fusion of the vignettes, and so yeah, we couldn't have done it without you, Liz.
You guys are sweet. It was so much fun.
And Emily, who's
A fun journey.
here with us in spirit. We should have just had like an extra block for Emily that, you know, like
We reference her like every like so often, like when she sees this, she's
Yeah.
like that.
It's like in Passover, you leave like a chair for Eliyahu or a cup for Eliyahu of wine, you know. So yeah, there's Emily.
So David,
What myself as a Jew?
what have you been up to since the release? Any new things going on?
Me? Yeah, I'm writing something with Asol. So
Awesome.
we're co-writing again. You're not sick of me yet, Asol? She's like, yup.
No, I think so we've been co-writing again, and I think that like the first movie was just like tipping our toes, you know.
Yeah.
Waters, and now I feel like we are fully like woof, in the waters, and that's great. Of course, it was like madness to write. Or for me, it was madness to write during quarantine while working and having a little baby and anyway, I'm not gonna just go into that, but yeah, that's all very exciting. Yeah,
I'm really glad to hear the collaborations to be continued and is
right
moving forward. I love, you know, often I see that with creatives in the film world, you kind of, it's sort of like, don't fix what's not broken. If you've got some great collaborations, keep them going, you make more great stuff. It's great to continue to expand, but fostering the relationships you guys have and to make more work. I can't wait to hear what's next with you all. So when it's ready. So
yeah, if you can make a movie with people and then you want to make another one with them, that is a good thing. Hold on to that, because there's so many different. The odds are against it, you know, because there's so many forces that sort of could make you not do that again.
Yes,
but,
very true. Very true. Well, I think we've kind of concluded our time here. I wish we could keep talking, but we'll have to end it there. Once again, we are so thrilled that you were able to join us today, and we were able to get some in-depth conversation going about the film. So please enjoy the rest of the festival yourself, and congratulations on Best Actress and Best Cinematography at 2020 Tribeca. And blessings to it continuing to grow out there in the world. So thank you once again, and cheers to Materna.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you so much.
Very kind of you.
Welcome.
Thank you. It's good talking to you.
Good to talk to you. So enjoy the rest of your day.
All right. Bye, y'all.
Bye.